Today we will read story number 3, Mr. Pickwick. This story is about a man whose name is Mr. Pickwick, and he has 3 friends, and this story is about their adventure and what did they do. One of the most lovable and endearing characters in English literature is Mr. Pickwick. Endearing means rousing affection, means कि जो हमें dear होता है. So this is a lovable and dear character English literature में. This is Mr. Pickwick. When you have read this, you will most certainly want to read the rest of the Pickwick papers. Means there are also some other papers that are written about Mr. Pickwick. So if you will read this story, you will be interested in his personality. So the story starts from here. The Pickwick Club. He makes a club with the help of his friends, and the name of the club was Mr. Pickwick Club. So now starts his adventure. Samuel Pickwick, this is his full name. He was a fine old gentleman. He had bright eyes, a large round face, a full figure, and a generous heart. This is his physical appearance, that we are told about his face, his eyes, and his heart, about his heart also. He dressed in an old-fashioned way, means कि वो old-fashioned के पुराने ज़माने की तरह कपड़े पहनता था, and always wore glasses. As you can see in the picture, this is Mr. Pickwick, and he is wearing glasses, and he was interested in everyone he met and everything he saw. Means his nature was like that. If he met anyone or if he saw anything, he got interested in that. He lived in England in the days when people were becoming very interested in science. जब साइंस में लोग इंटरेस्ट लेना स्टार्ट कर रहे थे इंग्लैंड में, in those days he was living in England. Mr. Pickwick himself liked science and natural history. These were his favorite subjects. He was famous for discovering where the water in the Hampstead ponds came from. This was his discovery, and if you know nothing about Hampstead ponds, never mind. Means you don't need to know about the details of this discovery. All you need to know is that Mr. Pickwick's friends thought he was very clever. The thing that you need to know about Mr. Pickwick is that actually he was not clever, but his friends thought that he was very clever. Mr. Pickwick and his friends made up a club. It was called the Pickwick Club. Mr. Pickwick was, of course, the most important person in the club. They made a club, and the name of the club was Mr. Pickwick Club. He was the main person of the most important person in the club. One day he talked to the other members, and then they made an important decision. They decided something. What was that? The club asked him to go on some special journeys. They decided that they would go on different journeys. He should write notes about everyone he met, everything he saw, and everything that happened, and everything he thought. Means Mr. Pickwick was asked that he would go on some journey, and during his journey he had to note or write down everything. Means if he met anyone, he had to write it down. If he saw anything, he had to describe him, and if anything happened, he also had to note it down, and everything he thought. Even he was asked to write his thinkings also. From time to time he should post his notes to the club, and he was asked that during his journey he would write different things, and from time to time he would send them to the club where the other members should read them, because only Pickwick was asked to go on the journey, and other members said that they would be in the club, and when Mr. Pickwick would send some notes, they would read them. Everyone believed that the notes and thoughts of Mr. Pickwick would be of great scientific interest. As we know that he was having interest in history and science, etc. So people think or thought that he would, whenever he would write something, that thing would have scientific interest or value. The club asked Mr. Pickwick to take 3 other people on his journeys. These were his special friends. Then they decided some other thing, that on his journey he could also take his friends with him, and his 3 special friends, Mr. Tracy Tupman, Mr. Nathaniel Winkle, and Mr. Augustus Snodgrass. These are the names of his 3 special friends, and they decided that they all 4 will go on the journey. All expenses for travel, food, and rooms would be paid for by Mr. Pickwick. As the club was named on Mr. Pickwick, so they said that all the expenses would be paid by Mr. Pickwick. The club said the expenses included travel, food, and rooms would be paid by. Means ये सारे जो expenses थे, travel के, food के, rooms के, ये सब Mr. Pickwick को pay करना थे. The club said that they could go anywhere they wished. They could they take as much time as they liked. They would start on their journey the following day. Means that they were free to go anywhere and visit any place, and then they decided, and then they started their journey the next day. The Pickwickians. The three people who would go with Mr. Pickwick were men of quite different interests and characters. His friends were having different interests and different characters. They were not like Mr. Pickwick, and Mr. Tracy Tupman was a middle-aged man. Now we are told about Mr. Pickwick's three friends, and their description is given one by one. And first of all, Mr. Tracy Tupman is described that he was a middle-aged man.